we're here to tackle the strangest parts of ancient history with critical thinking. From the matrix of myth to four-dimensional quantum angels to the nuances of the ancient Sumerian language. Shalom ana kalikunu, and welcome to Musings on Mysteries and the Mythical Matrix. Ladies and gentlemen, musers, seekers of truth, interdimensional philosophers, and finally, all of you that desperately cling to your confirmation bias. Whether your interest is Atlantis to Zeus, Cuneiform to quantum physics, we tackle it all. We're a podcast that explores ancient history, the unknown, and comparative mythology with logic, reason, the historic method, and a healthy dose of speculation. And for my first time doing that back after a while, I feel like I on the nose with it. Pretty decent.
Yeah.
All right. So, all that being said, I will kick it over to our resident future psychologist for a quick psych fact, and then we are going to jump into the episode overview.
So the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon occurs when we notice something for the first time, and then we start seeing it frequently, as if it suddenly started appearing everywhere, but it's not that. It's actually just a heightened awareness of it.
That's good. And that's important to keep in mind, too, as we're going to be talking about the Mythical Matrix here a little bit, is that there can be an inclination to sometimes see patterns where there aren't any. And there's definitely been once or twice on the podcast we've done that, and then I've had to go back and address some other stuff. So it's important to keep in mind.
It kind of relates to recency bias, too.
Yeah, it's the best thing ever. Because I saw it yesterday. I will apologize if it's a little bit echoey. I had to move out of my original studio for some renovations we have going on. So if you notice a little bit of different acoustics, that is why. Doing the best I can with what I've got. That being said, let's jump into the episode overview here. And I do not have stuff ready to take notes on timestamps. We're going to do that. All right. So episode overview. So the Mythical Matrix. First things we're going to do in this episode is explain what the Mythical Matrix actually is. Because I think we talked about that a little bit way back in the beginning of the show. But since we debuted episode 68, which is like an introduction to critical thinking, I think it's important to kind of set the groundwork a little bit with what some of the key M-Quad theories are, again, and maybe how they've changed over the last year and a half plus, just so you as the listener are kind of familiar with it, and you don't have to go back and listen all the way to like episodes 1 through 3 or whatever to like figure out where exactly we stand and what half the stuff we're saying like actually means. That way there's actually a good anchor point for how we think and what some of our key premises are on the show that you can latch on to. Next one is I've been reading a lot more academic literature, especially journal articles, since attending Grand Canyon University online gives me access to scholarly databases. I've been perusing not just psychology stuff, which is what the master's I'm working on is in, but I've also been perusing A&E stuff, ancient Near Eastern mythology stuff. And I have become a huge fan of Dr. Michael Heiser's work as of late, reading a lot of his articles. But there's one in particular he wrote about Baal and Yahweh that I think has some interesting parallels to potentially quantum physics that I want to talk about. So that's the next thing we're going to talk about after we kind of explore the Mythical Matrix a little bit. Then after all that, I'm going to hit some cumulative insights into ancient Sumerian and Akkadian from my research on the languages. I've been doing Sumerian for about a year now and Akkadian 6-8 months. So it's really interesting because like I remember doing a lot of research just over a year ago and looking at a lot of things, and now I go back and look at those same things and they have a very different meaning to me because I actually have like, not a perfect grasp, of course, but I have a solid grasp on how the languages work. So there's some new insights on things that like I think I've mentioned in passing on the show that like other scholars have said or like other works have said or whatever else that I'm looking at all that now and I'm like, okay, I can actually loosely get an opinion on this because of, all my language research. And then kind of wrapping up the show, we'll do a little bit of a life update, talk about at least where I'm at, because just some brief updates and everything, and why we're not releasing as many episodes. So, but yeah, anything else you want to add to all of that?
No.
All right, so we're going to jump right into talking about the Mythical Matrix here. So what is the Mythical Matrix? The Mythical Matrix, also known or referred to as the Myth, is the hypothesis that many mythologies ultimately trace back to a more ancient shared narrative core, a proto-mythology, if you will, that predates the versions of mythology we currently possess. This hypothesis guides my study of individual mythologies to examine what overlapping motifs matter and to what degree. So that's like a key tenet of what we do here on Musings and Mysteries and the Mythical Matrix. Half of our name, that's M2D instead of M4D.
Ha ha ha.
So, no pun intended. But anyway, so I mean, this is a very nuanced approach, of course, because you can't say something like this too broadly. Like, I can't say every single mythology is a fingerprint of an original myth. We can't say that with absolute certainty, because that's just too broad of a statement. There's too many nuances in mythology, and we have examples of myth borrowing and retelling of stories. The Mesopotamian scribes that spoke Akkadian took Sumerian tales like Gilgamesh and Inanna's Descent, and they repurposed them into from Sumerian into Akkadian, and it seems like they changed details here and there. I know at least with Nana's Descent to Ishtar's Descent, they changed some minor things in there, and I think in Gilgamesh as well, but I'm not as fresh on that, so I'll say that with caution. So there are certainly instances of this, but that being said, my theory on all of this is that everything connects to a broader picture. So when we're looking at mythologies around the world and we start seeing, similar motifs, and we'll talk about this a lot more in depth on the next episode as well. So I'm not gonna dive ultra deep into a metamyth study, which is what we're gonna do next time. But there are parallels that exist, and I think that just chalking every single parallel up to copying can risk being lazy, in a sense, intellectually lazy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts you want to interject thus far? Please have a thought, because I'm thirsty. I need to take a sip of water.
I really don't. It's been a long day.
Yeah, I hear that. It's been a long week for me. So
yeah.
It's been a long week for you too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, ultimately, this theory is what spurs on our comparative mythology study and why we're doing what we're doing here on Musings and Mysteries in the Mythical Matrix, why we take these individual myths and we just talk about them in depth. We'll retell them, we'll pull out some key elements, and then we'll contrast to previous things that we've talked about. Because it's the whole premise here is it's a compounding study, if you will. If you hear any creaking in the background, I have a new chair, and so it's the leather the leather creaking. So just to clarify that. But yeah, so I mean, this is what spurs on our study. Is we go through and we look at one myth at a time, and we pull out what motifs exist, what the underlying threads are, and then we contrast that to other things we've examined. And my theory on it is that you can infer the past proto-mythology to a large degree of accuracy by looking at the collective parts of all other mythologies. And that's like the core foundation of MQuad, is it's taking everything from human experience, pre I don't know, I don't even want to put a date on it because there's just so many mythologies, so many nuances, pre-1500s in AD, and just taking everything and reassembling it through the historical method and logic and critical thinking perspective that we've talked about, in taking all of these pieces, boiling them down to their core parts, and then using those core parts to reconstruct what narrative originally existed or what these ancients originally experienced. Because the idea of proto mythology is not discriminate against the true or false narrative. I lean more towards true. I'm a trusting person. I think the ancients wrote all this down. I think that yes, there is a space for them encoding other things within mythology, like astronomical information. But to just hand wave everything away as, oh, all this stuff about lowercase g gods, just, oh, it's just whatever, it's just the dumb ancients kind of thing, because they didn't understand germs and all of that. It's like, well, maybe to an extent we need to consider that, but to just dismiss everything wholesale the way that modern academia does, I'm a little bit more hesitant on. So that doesn't mean the ancients had a perfect understanding of what they wrote down, of course, because
Yeah.
like you could write down this really crazy experience. There's a lot of memes that circle around, like the Book of Revelation, like if you take it from a Christian perspective as being real, the Apostle John is seeing like tank battles potentially and drone warfare and all these other things going on.
Wow.
And it's like, how do you, as a living in around 90 AD person, conceptualize these concepts of like literally like watching like M1 Abrams tanks shoot at each other and drones flying around and producing massive like, how do you conceptualize that? So it doesn't mean that the ancients understood everything they saw perfectly, but I think I lean more towards trusting than not that many of the experiences the ancients wrote down were real. And so that's the whole point of our study and why we go case by case. And I'm setting all of this up because the next episode, we're actually going to go really in depth and we're going to pull a bunch of the motifs that overlap and we're going to talk about a bunch of those more. So I don't want to get too into the weeds now, but I'll hit like a couple brief notes on it just so you as a listener for this episode can, wrap your mind around it and decide if you want to keep listening for, to the next episode. But some of these underlying similarities, you can pull out a lot of similar motifs from Genesis, the Enuma Elish, and the Popol Vuh. They're all basic creation myths, stories that have some very similar existing elements. They all start with like water at the beginning of creation, and the land is sculpted out of it, etc. Another example is flood myths. We have flood myths all over the world. We find them in the A&E region, ancient Near East, with Gilgamesh. The Greeks have it. I think the Egyptians have it as well. The Bible has it. But then we kind of see these things around the world as well. I think the Norse have it, and there's Native American tradition, especially in South America. So you have these things around the world that exist. And then another great example of overlapping motifs, divine storm deity battling a serpent monster. And that's another one that's pretty prevalent. Studying like mythology and seeing like all of the different threads that pop up. We see it in Sumer, we see it with Baal, we see it mentioned in the Bible, we see it with Native Americans as well. So yeah, so I mean, like, we'll go through in the next episode and dive more in depth because I don't want to get too into the weeds in this episode, but that is those are some of the motifs that we've been able to pull out thus far in the last 68 episodes. Some other final things I'll hit here is looking from a historian perspective, like with Herodotus. He's like I think the technical term is like the father of history, where he was like the first one we have record of to go around and actually like have like modern historian to an extent rigor. Vetting his sources and everything. There are some criticisms of him from more critical scholarship, but I see little reason for that thus far. I'm actually working through reading one of like Herodotus's big compilation of work that he put together in all the different book collections. It's a massive book. But yeah. So, I mean, but like, so you got like Herodotus, right? And he's around the time of Xerxes, the 300 Spartans, all that, the Book of Esther, all of that stuff. Trying to think when that would have been. That probably would have been like around 400, 500 BC. But like, I think it's a little ridiculous to assume or believe wholesale that there was no methodologically rigorous historian before Herodotus in around 500 BC. Like, to me, that's like yes, there's room for exaggeration with these myths and everything, but like mythology was the way of storytelling to the ancients, and maybe it encoded stuff, or maybe it's just more literal than we think. And I think that there's a fine line to walk on both sides there.
Let me ask you this. What is the difference between a modern day historian and what you're referring to?
Like with Herodotus specifically, or like
Yeah, like a
before?
historian before Herodotus.
Uh,
How is that different from a modern day historian?
so I mean, we have a lot of examples in ancient texts where like embarrassing events, lost battles, or names of kings that weren't liked were sometimes redacted and stuff like that. Herodotus kind of seemed to, again, this is my loose understanding. I haven't done my crazy deep dive on this yet, but Herodotus more in that kind of mindset is like about exploring just what the evidence actually says, regardless of any censorship or anything like that from the modern day.
Okay.
So that's what I'm talking about more, is that there's no censorship of things that aren't liked or exaggeration of things that would be beneficial. So like, trying to think of a good example, like a fish story, like when you catch a fish, you might brag that like,
Yeah.
instead of it being like a foot long, that it was 2 feet long and it almost broke your line. And you add all these extra details that aren't really necessary. And certainly there is room to consider this in mythology and all that, before and after Herodotus, in all history. But I think to assume that history only gets largely reliable because it fits our modern definitions of believable after that time period, and to exclude everything before is just being too like fairy tale like when we say mythology, I think that does a disservice to the ancients as well.
Yeah.
Again,
I would agree with that. Yeah.
healthy skepticism. I'm not saying believe it blindly, but like also to dismiss everything as fairy tale. It's like it's respectfully is a little ridiculous to me to just to be like, oh yeah, all this stuff about Gilgamesh being like a giant or whatever, like, oh, that's the giants, all that's just fairy tales. Well, maybe not. Let's like do our due diligence, and just because like we don't yet have the ability to prove it doesn't mean we should just like discount it wholesale.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, so I mean, like, we have to consider how much redaction, editing, exaggeration all play a role into all of this. Criteria of embarrassment's another big one. If this is something that historians use, this is a huge sticking point for me in my faith, actually, with the Bible. But the criteria of embarrassment is that if it is included in a text, like embarrassing details, something like a lost battle or a hero that would have been more idolized, doing something embarrassing, like David order in the Bible, ordering the execution of murder, like murdering Uriah the Hittite.
Yeah.
Sleeping with his wife. Like David was like a huge hero to the Hebrews, and to write those details, if it didn't actually happen, is very bizarre and very unlikely. So when you have a historic account that is willing to, and this is why like looking at the Epic of Gilgamesh too, like in the Epic of Gilgamesh, that's not just a hero's like story, he wins and rides off into the sunset with Enkidu. It's that Enkidu dies because they let their hubris push them so far that they end up challenging the gods, and then Gilgamesh is depressed and scared to die, and then he goes on this journey to seek out and see if he can attain eternal life. And then he ultimately loses it. Like he gets it, he has it, and then a snake comes by and eats it. And it's like you have these details. It's like we can't say that every little detail might be true, but the fact that there are these little embarrassing nuggets in here, like you wouldn't want it to be broadcasted to the world that you had eternal life in your grasp and you fell asleep and then it got eaten out of your hand by another animal, by a snake. Like, that's kind of embarrassing,
I think, like, I always go back to the example of Simon, Peter, and John, like, running the race.
Yeah, I have a personal theory on that one, like racing to the tomb, that because I think the only gospel that has that is the Gospel of John. I have a personal theory that John waited until after Peter had been martyred to write that down, because he knew if he wrote that down when Peter was still alive, Peter would find him and beat the crap out of him, because Peter had a reputation for like that kind of thing.
Yeah, you're right. It's in John.
Yeah. But yeah, so again, we'll kind of wrap up this section here and take a quick break. But I'm I personally am just more inclined to trust the ancients unless there's a reason not to. My mindset is if I read something and it fits like the criteria of embarrassment and there's no major reason to distrust it, I'm more inclined to believe that it's literal. Now, how we interpret it, that can be a different story. That can be a different conversation. But in overall summary of everything we've been talking about here, I am not like married to the Mythical Matrix model. Like if there
I would
was,
hope not.
yeah, because I'm married to you. But like if the evidence truly points elsewhere and the framework just collapses in on itself, like I'm okay to walk away from the Mythical Matrix idea. But it's a theoretical model that I use and that I think best explains all of the data that we have. Like how else do we explain similar threads across mythology that span continents that weren't supposed to have had contact with each other?
Right.
And yet, like, scholars are often resistant to this kind of a theory and tend to dismiss it with a wave of the hand or try to like force irrelevant parallels, which we've discussed before, like with cedar, like the cedar wood. That one that drove me up the wall. I'm like,
You were so mad.
well, no, because yeah, sorry for you as a listener if you're just tuning in for the first time. This one comes from the Baal cycle. One scholar tried to like kind of suggest a parallel because Baal's temple used cedar and so did Solomon's temple, and it's like pretty much everybody used cedar in the A&E region. That's an irrelevant parallel. And it's like it's stuff like this. Like I'm not anti-scholarship, but scholars do tend to sometimes have like too much of a loyalty to weak models, and I think that we have to be careful to not just be loyal to weak models and consensus and pursue the truth. But there are some fantastic scholars out there, as I've found recently, and we will talk about an article written by one of these scholars when we return in a moment. And we returned here on Musings on Mysteries and the Mythical Matrix to explore a different angle here. Fourth dimensional entities, possibly, perhaps, but we'll leave that for you to decide. So, all of this comes from an article I read by Dr. Michael Heiser. I'll put the this reference in the show notes description, whatever you're listening on. But I'll try to give a quick recap here. It might not be perfect, but overall, my understanding of this particular article is that Heiser's argument is that from the Ugaritic pantheon, and if you're confused what that means, go listen to episode 66, the Baal cycle. But El and Baal are two deities, and they take two separate roles. El sits on the high throne. Baal is more active into the day-to-day. And then he argues that Israel integrates this type of concept and uses it to, quote-unquote, have two Yahwehs that play, where Yahweh plays both roles simultaneously. And my understanding and read of this article is that he kind of postulates that this comes from Ugarit, which I think is weird because that's generally not his perspective. He was not the Canaanite polytheism influenced Hebrew monotheism. A lot of his articles and work centers actually to pushing back against that consensus that exists. So I kind of thought that was interesting. Maybe I read him wrong there on this particular article, but I'll leave that for you as a listener to decide if you want to do your own research. But I wanted to talk about this a little bit because I thought this postulated a very interesting idea. The Yahweh existing in two places at the same time could be a mirror of, one, a pre-Trinity from a Christian worldview, if we look at it from Yahweh and El perspective, or that we could, from an M-Quad perspective, we could be talking about an advanced entity in two places at once via four-dimensional mechanics. Thoughts? None? Okay. All right, that's fine. But yeah, so another core tenet of M-Quad is what kind of started me on the whole M quad thing was looking at the descriptions of angels in the Bible and how they're described as really bizarre, having four faces, spinning wheels with eyes all over, these things that
Right.
didn't seem to make sense. And then I started thinking about it and I'm like, well, hang on. If this was a four-dimensional entity projected onto a 3D being's perspective, like these prophets that are seeing this, that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Something that would have four faces in 3D might have like a unified face or something in 4D. Like this fits.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of led to, and that's why we have four M's in the name, is, you know, Musings on Mysteries in the Mythical Matrix, is that it's supposed to subtly also infer the four dimensions, like the four-dimensional theory. So looking at all, coming from that lens, we could postulate here that what Dr. Heiser is hinting at and coming to a conclusion of could actually be something that it actually exists via four-dimensional mechanics, because we have things like quantum entanglement, where two particles can be entangled together and then separated, and you can poke one and there'll be an instantaneous reaction from the other. So, you know, to us, you know, again, without accidentally committing the third century church heresy here, let's boil this down to, you know, instead of trying to think in terms of 4 dimension to 3 dimension, let's think in terms of 3 dimension to 2 dimension. So imagine a stick figure on a piece of paper that he's existing in his 2D world.
Right.
You know, I can take my hand and let's say I can insert it into the piece of paper and into his world, and I can do things, but I'm also holding the piece of paper with my other hand. To this 2D figure, he sees me at multiple places at the same time. It doesn't make any sense, but in a 3D perspective, it's all one place to me. I'm still interacting with it, and I'm not splitting myself. It just appears that I'm splitting myself to him.
Yeah.
So, looking at what Dr. Heiser wrote, I could very easily see this four-dimensional perspective fitting with this conversation on Yahweh here. So, that was kind of my key connection as I was reading all of that, and I'm like, hey, wait, this actually fits with M quad here. Like that this actually synergizes quite well. We could also, third perspective, this leans more critical scholarship theory, but I want to state all sorts of different interpretations here, but we can also postulate that the Israelites put Yahweh in both roles to maintain him as a quote unquote supreme deity, you know, to maintain the appearance of that. But yeah, looking through my notes here, because I kind of jumped all over the place, so they're a bit disheveled. Yeah, you have anything to add on everything that I said thus far as I peruse?
I mean,
You're looking
so
at my notes, dude.
yeah.
Good luck. Good
What
luck.
do you
It's
mean?
incoherent.
What do you mean specifically about just ensuring that he seems like a supreme deity? Like to who?
It's to the Israelites, to the Hebrews. Like, so the Ugaritic theory was that El was this like kind of supreme deity. I think that's what we can infer off of the limited corpus that we have, and that El was sitting kind of on the throne, if you will, and so he had to be on the throne at all times because there had to be a deity on the throne. But then Baal could come down and be more active. And so there was two roles, if you will, where Baal had his temple on Mount Zaphon, which is near the border of Syria and Turkey on the coastline. So shooting just pretty much straight north from Israel, which interestingly, actually, some of the northern directional words, when you see like to the north used in the Bible, it may actually be literally saying like towards Zaphon, like it's a cardinal direction almost in a sense. So I think that was at least one of the Psalms that uses that. But to circle back to your point here, so the critical scholarship lens, you know, might, depending on the scholar you ask, take the approach that the Hebrews are arguing this perspective because they want Yahweh to both be active in the day-to-day and to exalt him as supreme above all other deities.
Right.
So, another interesting angle I actually was thinking about today and came across was that I think the whole if you admit the Canaanite conquest from a biblical perspective, it kind of shatters the critical scholarship model. Again, it depends which model we're talking, because there's a lot of variation in the field, it seems, and it's hard to pin down what exactly they fully believe and what their whole model looks like. But if you are coming in and conquering another people, like the Canaanite conquest, so when Joshua comes in and conquers Canaan and Israel establishes itself, there is I believe a prevalent system in the A&E that, like, when two peoples fight, it's kind of almost a battle of whose God is greater. So if the Israelites come in and their God is Yahweh and they just kick everyone's butts out of Canaan and they take over, they kind of already believe that Yahweh is supreme. Like he's more powerful than all of the local deities. Like,
Right.
that's kind of like required almost, in a sense. So it's like, if you admit that the Canaanite conquest happened historically, I think that this whole idea of however you, I know that there's wacky ways to say this stuff, but basically, like, monotheism with Yahweh at the center evolved from polytheism. Like, that whole model kind of collapses in on itself almost, because, like, again, depends how you define monotheism and polytheism. But if you're looking at it more of like, who is like the greatest God exalted above all others, that, yeah, like that, the Israelites seem to, just by nature of what the texts claim about a conquest, already have believed that in some capacity or another. And so I don't think it doesn't seem like it requires as much evolution as is sometimes postulated by scholars, if we take that as historic fact, the conquest, which there may be some debate about. I'm not up on that history, but that was another angle that I wanted to, consider and address here. But yeah, I think that's all I have on this section here. Do you have any other questions on things I took notes on, or like what we talked about?
I think
or anything?
I'm good now.
Okay. All right. So what we will do is we will take a super quick break, and we will return in a minute, and we're going to talk about some linguistics. So we're kind of bouncing all over the place on this episode, but should still be entertaining. So stick around if you want to learn some nuances of ancient Sumerian and Akkadian and what that might mean. Our setup is jank here on Musings on Mysteries and the Mythical Matrix. It's why the break here ran a little bit longer. We were talking off air, and I'm like, that fixed it too a little bit.
Yeah. It's just hilarious.
Okay, so I'm listening to this here, and I'm a bit OCD about how the podcast sounds, so I apologize profusely if it's been atrocious up until now. But yeah, it's just only so much I can do, because I'm having to relocate into a acoustic, non-friendly room, and I probably should have done some tests, and I didn't. But during the break, I was like, oh, wait, I have an idea. So I ran over and I grabbed I have a martial arts pad, like a really big one. It's probably like, I don't know, 10, 15, probably 15 feet by like 4 feet or something. And I just set it up right behind where we're staring at, to kind of help soften the sound and the bouncing of the acoustics. And it actually seems to have helped a tiny bit.
A tiny bit.
So, but it is what it is. I am I'm looking around. I'm gonna try to figure out a way to hang up some of the blankets that I washed. I think to absorb the sound a little bit more, because I like the podcast to sound nice. And yeah, so I mean that's like,
you want to serenade them.
yeah. So I mean it's okay. A little bit insight into Josiah's brain here. So I'm just gonna be real here with this. So it's like, I'm now currently learning. Well, I'll dive into this a little bit more, but I'm now currently studying in various capacities. Like I'm not full sending every single one of these, but I'm now studying 12 languages, and I'm the type of weirdo that I took Calc 2 and 3 for fun in college. I'm trying to figure out something else making a crinkling. Oh, it's my trash can. Okay, that's why I said my chair was on a trash can when I came back and repositioned.
Jank.
Yes, very jank. So, yeah. I'm like studying 12 languages. I'm the weirdo that took like calculus in college for fun. Like that was just like, and I was like, I'm decent at this. Might as well, kind of a thing. But like I sometimes get a little perfectionistic off of that as well, where like I want things to be a certain way. So like I have routinely obsessed about the sound and audio quality on the podcast, and looking back on it, it's like I am a little bit cringy still about how some of them came out, because I tried to over process it too much. But you know, it is what it is. So that's just kind of a little insider for all of you listening. So hopefully that kind of softens the blow if there's any bad quality in here. But anywho, let's talk about Sumerian and Akkadian now that we've talked about how jank the setup is. I already qualified this at the beginning, but it's worth restating, because like whenever you say, "Oh, I can speak," or no one really speaks, but I can read Sumerian, or I've been studying Akkadian, I don't want that to give listeners the wrong perception. I started with Sumerian. I grew up in Europe, so I already have German kind of down for the most part, at least like to an intermediate level. I'm a bit rusty, but it's sitting comfortably in the intermediate. But aside from that, in English, Sumerian is the language I've been studying the longest. This journey started about a year ago. I've got 6-7 months in Akkadian, added Hebrew and Greek, and a bunch of other languages since then. We'll discuss that in the next segment probably. But yeah, so I'm not an expert. I would say to be like an expert at Sumerian, I project it's going to take probably like 3 to 5 years of study. So I am not claiming expertise now in any capacity. I could be wrong in some of the things I say, but I am much more informed than I was a year ago. And I'm saying everything that I'm about to say because I do think there is some validity to it.
Even experts get stuff wrong.
Exactly. I mean, like Wes Huff got some basic facts wrong on one of the interviews that he did, and he had to do a Wes Huff debunks Wes Huff video at one point. But it's like, no, like seriously, like this whole platform is about correcting ourselves and making ourselves better as we go. It's a record of seeking truth. It's not a claim of absolute truth at any one given point. So, and that's the beauty of it, because it's like, there's not as much pressure that way. And I like that, because it's like I can get stuff wrong and it's okay. So, not that I like to get stuff wrong. Again, perfectionism comes in,
You're human.
We all are. Or are we? That's a question for another episode. I did not just open that can of worms.
Seal it up.
All right. The worm can has been saran wrapped. Moving on. All right. They might still come out. Anyway, first thing we're going to talk about is something from the Sumerian king list. The first line seems to use what's called an imperative, and that appears to me to potentially be in the third person, which is interesting. So I'll pull this up here because this is perpetually open on my computer, actually. So Maddie's laughing because she's literally watching my screen right now, because we actually are sitting on the same side now. And she's literally just watched me like pull open a tab, and like right next to the MQuad YouTube, I just have the Cuneiform text corpus page open, and I'm just scrolling through these Sumerian signs with like transliteration stuff next to it. But so the first line in the Sumerian kings list is that the kingship came down from heaven, I think is how it's more typically translated. I don't have an official translation, ETCSL or anything in front of me, so I'm postulating. But what's interesting here is that Sumerian, Semitic languages do this as well, but Sumerian actually encapsulates a lot of details in the verbal chain here. So there's two signs that are the actual verb, and then when you have the prefixal elements after the verb, which is the case here, that seems to be more of like an imperative. So it's more of a declaration than just a statement. So it's like the kingship came down versus like, the kingship came down kind of a thing. Like that's like the difference in imperative.
You mean just more emphasis?
Yeah.
Like an exclamation point versus a period.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's probably some more nuance to that I'm still missing and I have yet still to learn.
Gotcha.
But that's kind of the gist of it, because it's not normal to have all of your prefixal elements slammed onto the end here. That only, for my study, happens with an imperative. So I think it's interesting that this starts off with an imperative and a declaration. But the other thing that I thought was interesting is that there also seems to be a third person marker included here, which is usually expressed as N in Sumerian. And I talk about some of these breakdowns, not this specifically, but how Sumerian breaks down. I'll occasionally live stream like translation practice with the Sumerian. So if you're curious to see how that looks, there you go. But what's interesting is this almost seems to say, my translation attempt at this at my current level, I'd look at this and I would say this first line says, they brought the kingship down from heaven. That would be how I would translate it looking at it. And I think that's really interesting because we have to ask who's they.
Yeah.
So, but again, this mirrors that motif that we see in Enoch in Genesis 6 of what is described as fallen angels in these texts coming down and, doing things and establishing like rule and like, I guess, kind of kingship by proxy, almost in a sense, with men of renown in Genesis 6. But this concept, this A&E concept, is echoed in the Sumerian king list, and it's echoed in a subtle way that I don't think just screams that the Hebrews were automatically borrowing this. This seemed to be kind of an understood tradition of something that either did happen or a story of something that happened. So I thought that was interesting. I wanted to share that. That was the first thing that really stood out to me. The next one is from one of the copies of the Lugal E, and this one came from the ETCSL. But the Lugal E, we broke down that myth. That's Ninurta's exploits. For those of you that want to go back and listen to it, that would have been... I gotta load the podcast episode. I don't remember that. I want to say 40 something. Maybe I'm gonna guess. I was gonna guess 47. That was wrong. I think 48. Yeah, I think either 48 or 45. Yeah, well, because those are the same myth, actually. Yeah, so 48, 45. That was one of the ones where I had to go back and correct some stuff. Because of, what was the psych fact that you did? Tending to see patterns and things because of like a belief or whatever.
For that one? For that episode?
No, this episode.
Oh,
I forget what it was called, that effect.
No, I forget.
That. Whatever that is. I'll keep going and then you can interject whenever you find it. But yeah, I saw a pattern, I made a parallel. Go ahead.
Bader-Meinhof phenomenon.
Yeah, something akin to the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, where I saw a pattern and I jumped too quick to a conclusion, but there was a nuance there to explore. So we went back. Anyway, but yes, the Lugal E, that should be the Lugal E. I'm kind of having a mind space right now, but that should be it. If I'm wrong, drop it in the comments and be like, yeah, just you got that wrong, and then I'll OCD, perfectionistic obsess over it. So,
you guys need to whip them into shape.
Yeah.
Or gals.
But what's interesting is that on the ETCSL, because I was going over the Lugal E, and I talked about this on one of my Sumerian live translation videos, I think the first one, where I was just kind of like showing my practice attempts. The first line opens up with On Lugal Dingorenene Ke Nergal, which there's only one manuscript that has this, but it's really weird because it's an epitaph that reads basically almost praise to On, or that On sanctions this. that like everything that you're about to read. But the Lugal E is not about On, it's about Ninurta, who is like a storm farm deity for the Mesopotamian pantheon. So it's not directly On. And so I thought that was interesting because this kind of seems to be featuring almost universal monolatry in a sense, where On is thought by some Sumerians to have been exalted above all of these other deities. Because why else would you include an epitaph praising another deity when the whole story is about what that deity did? You know, like what another deity. Like, why would you praise deity X at the very beginning if the whole thing is about deity Y, unless deity X is really important? And that's not a very common thing from what I've seen in Mesopotamian literature, because usually, like, stuff that talks about Inanna, it'll open with praise to Inanna and it'll close with praise to Inanna. Like, it'll say something like, oh, Inanna is sweet to praise you, or something akin to that. And it'll usually open with stuff too, from my recollection. So having another deity mentioned in the tale of a separate deity is weird. But like the whole epitaph phrase that we have here is kind of weird as well, because it's On, king over all of the gods, and then we have an ergative marker slapped onto the end there. So it's an ergative marker means that On is doing something or taking action on something. And kind of my implication off of this is that On is sanctioning the entire myth that you're about to read, which again plays into that he is supreme because he's commissioning this act to happen. And then Nergal is like to be great, I think, or something. And so that's just, or like to be mighty. I think the ETCSL takes a little bit more of an eloquent translation to that, and just puts it as like an attribute or an adjective of On. But yeah, so it was just kind of weird. And it seems to kind of mirror this like universal monolatry that might have been lost, talking about like coming at this from more of a biblical perspective. It fits with a biblical worldview that there is a high deity that is forgotten, that kind of sits back on the throne, and we kind of see this mirrored in Ugaritic as well with El, the chief deity. Anything you want to add on that?
No.
Okay. I need to come up with some ways to like ask you like better questions or something so we can get some more interaction.
I apologize.
From you. No, it's okay. I'm not teeing stuff up for you. I'm just saying a lot of stuff. So, okay. A couple more phrases here. We're going to shift a little bit more towards Akkadian now. So we're going to talk about. This is when we talk about the Sumerian king list. It probably would have been impaired with the Eridu Genesis, the Azudra, probably. I'm thinking late 30s in our episode Q. But there was one point where I talked about Eve Engelbright's book, the Sumerian Genesis Solves the Sumerian King List. She postulates that one of the names on the list is not actually a name, but it's an Akkadian phrase, which my understanding happens, my loose understanding, in that the phrase Kulashina Bel that is translated. And she said that she read this as, and they all ruled together. They all ruled as one, because it's about to start the context for this existence. It only happens once on the Sumerian king list. But the context here is that the flood has just happened. Kingship comes back down from heaven. It sits down in Kish, and then 1,200 years to do Kulashina Bel, and then goes into naming these other rulers. So now that I actually know some Akkadian, I can actually comment on this. So I'm gonna break this down here. So the phrase here, Kulashina Bel, Kul seems to be an acceptable variant for the Akkadian Kali. So if you'll think back to the intro here, when I say Shomo Mana Kalikunu, that is peace to all you, literally, if you break it down. Shomum is peace, Ana is to for dative preposition, and then Kali is all, Kunu is second masculine plural, so basically like y'all. And masculine, in Semitic languages, masculine gender is the catch-all for both male and females. So,
yeah.
So if you think back to that, so the Kali, cool is seems to be an acceptable variant to me, because you also in Hebrew you have kol is, I'm probably saying that wrong, but it's kol, is all, and I would not be surprised if it was very similar in Ugaritic. I haven't gotten that far in my vocab there yet. But all three of those are Semitic languages, so it seems to be within the ballpark of reason, especially considering regional dialect and different ways of writing signs, and like maybe slightly different vowel emphasis or interpretation of vowels per scribe. So it doesn't seem out of the question for me to say that that first part fits. The last part, Bel, lord or ruler. This is a very common epitaph. Baal is lord in Ugaritic. Baal is lord in Hebrew. Bel is lord in Akkadian. Phoenician uses like a Bel Baal variant as well. Very common across all Semitic languages. So nothing out of the ordinary here. We'll talk about Sheena in a second. I don't know 100% certainty on the order. The order at a glance seems right, but when you get into morphology where it combines like pronoun into like two different, like, I guess they're nouns. I struggle sometimes with the classifications of stuff, but like with something like this, it seems like it's probably in the right order, but that'll probably be, I'll probably be able to tell like at a quick glance in like another 6 months. But my big problem with this line and that interpretation is Sheena, because that is third person feminine plural, not masculine plural, which is kind of weird. So unless there's some nuance in like the sign variants here, which is possible, or a scribal choice, that doesn't, because again, as I just described from our intro here, the catch-all for if you have men and women is you use the male gender in Semitic languages. That's just how it worked. So when you're listing a bunch of presumed kings, because there's at least one or two epitaphs where they are clearly 100% identified as sons, I think. And then you have like Gilgamesh and everything like that as well, who, you know, I assume we know he's a man. I guess I probably should have put a little more thought into this. Anyway, the existence of one male on the list of probably, I don't even know how many are on the Sumerian king list. 150, a lot. There's a lot of kings, and depends which version you look at. But the existence of one male on that whole list would turn this pronoun part here masculine. Even just one. Even if every single one was female, except for one, by Semitic rules, that would turn it masculine. Unless the scribe just didn't understand Akkadian as well and was more Sumerian leaning. That initially wrote this, or if it's a scribal error, or if this is even just no, because it's not a transcription thing, because that was actually in Eve Engelwright's book. But yeah, so it's a possible reading that's what this is saying, and I do think that her argument still stands, because I think the rules were concurrent, because that's the only, again, I don't want to get too much into the weeds here on this and spend all episode talking about this one point. But I have reason to believe that there were concurrent reigns on the Sumerian king list. It wasn't just successive, like one after the other. Like there were multiple of these rulers you see listed ruling together. But I don't think, yeah, I think her overall point stands. I'm not convinced on the linguistic rigidity of this particular argument here. I think that it's a possible reading. You could argue with a little bit of flex, but is it the most robust, academically defendable interpretation? Probably not. So it's nice because like I can actually go back and look at this with like my understanding of Akkadian and be able to interject some thoughts. So all of that being said, we're going to take a brief pause here because we've been going for a while. We'll come back, finish up some linguistic stuff, and then we will do a brief life update and then close out the show. Stay tuned. Has your significant other told you that they love you in the oldest recorded language?
No, how dare they?
Yeah. Yours has.
Yes, mine has.
That was the next thing I wanted to talk about, because this is a little bit more goofy and lovey-dovey, but yeah, I wanted to talk
It's very
about this one.
lovey-dovey, but
Yes,
it's cute.
because like we decided we weren't going to do anything big for like Valentine's Day, and because we're recording this in March, so you're probably gonna be listening to this in May, I think, is when I have this slotted to release. So, but yeah, so we decided we weren't going to do like anything like massive for each other for Valentine's Day, and I was thinking, and I'm like, wait, I could, because I've done them before. I'm like, I could take and I can make a cuneiform little tablet thing that says "I love you" in Sumerian. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. So what?
It says "my beloved" or
Well, yeah,
whatever.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
get to that.
Okay.
Give me a second.
Sorry. I'll sit back down.
You're good. So yeah, the way that, and again, I'm blanking on a lot of the technical semantic terminology here, but the way that I love you is said in Sumerian, at least from our understanding, is like to say like my beloved, the one that I love. So it's kiag, which is like, like the place where my heart resides, maybe. It might be a little more breakdown, but like kiag is understood as love. Is like I think it's a nominalizer, I want to say. But it takes it from being like a verb into like a descriptor. I don't think it's explicitly a noun, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, I learning these languages, sometimes I know the terminology well, sometimes I just kind of intuit it. So, and then gu 10, which is also the mu sign, but that's the first person case ending there. So basically translates to my beloved. But yes, my original inspiration was, how do I say I love you in Sumerian? But it ended up being kiagagu, because that's the way that you could say it in Sumerian, that we actually have like close attestation for. I think our closest is, I think, third person. I think there's a first person variant as well, but it's not exactly this. It's there's a scribal variant to it. But yeah, so did that, and then I made a necklace for you as well with that on there. You like small necklaces, so I did it really small, but that was fun. I enjoyed it. So yeah.
Yes.
So that was a fun.
So now it's on my desk at work.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I was thinking as well, and it's like, this is not a bad merch idea either. So I do have a couple extra necklaces that I have made just for like, I don't know, next couple of years when the MQuad platform actually opens up like a merch store or whatever, that like, for Valentine's Day, it's like, hey, have you told, the person that you love that you love them in the oldest language recorded?
Well, now's your chance.
Yeah, it's like that. That's a pretty good
for
market.
the low price.
Yeah. $999.
And if you buy two, you get a picture of a free penny. Or a free picture of a penny.
Get some ninja throwing stars. But yeah, so that would be that'd be something I was thinking about doing in the in the next couple of years here, when we actually have the merch store going and everything. So if that's something you're interested in, let us know. There's also going to be a new closeout phrase that I'm going to use, because I was playing around with Akkadian. Because I like Akkadian's kind of my sandbox language, where I just take it and I play with words. And because that's how I like best learn a language, when I want to like learn it fully comprehensively, because we want to actually talk Akkadian to each other, like revive Akkadian and talk it to each other. And Akkadian is very well attested. There's a lot more examples, and because it's Semitic, we can reconstruct it where there's gaps, which I think is very few, because there's such a huge corpus of like text and everything that exist. But all that being said, like I don't have the same goals for every language. Like some languages, it's just tourism talk, or if it's just brief familiarity, so I can look at inscriptions and have like a gist of it or something like that. But for the closeout phrase, I built this phrase here: Ishat uznim lu tisha adi nipacher. And we're gonna break this down, so don't worry. That's So the phrase is, may the flame of wisdom be with you until we meet next. And the next is kind of inferred there. So Ishet is flame. Uznim is, we talked about that one a while back on the podcast. So Uznim is wisdom, but it's also the word for ear. And it has this implication of wisdom that is heard or like gleaned from like generally hearing, but you could also kind of maybe add in like reading, study. So the flame of wisdom embodies this idea of wisdom that is applied to burn off what doesn't last. That's kind of my intent and implication to it. So Ishet Uznim. So Ishet is the bound form of Ishetum, which is fire or flame. And then you have Uznim. So the flame of wisdom, it encapsulates this active process of using what you learn and your study to seek to burn off, to seek the truth, kind of a thing, which encapsulates the whole premise of the show very well. And then you have Lu Tisha, so it's like may it be with you. Lu is like may, I think. There might be some more flex in it in the I forget. And then Tisha is you have. That's second person plural. And then Adi Nipacher. So Adi is until, and then Pacher root is future or I think present as well for meet, gather. And then the ni is like we, is the we prefix that goes on to the verb, and that's the verb at the end. But Tisha is also technically a verb, so it's two phrases. So the phrase there is Ishat uznim lu tisha adi nipacher. And again, translation, may the flame of wisdom be with you until we meet next. But yeah, I think that encapsulates the podcast essence pretty well. Thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. We'll do a brief life update here next, and then close out the show because I haven't made any podcasts or videos in a while, and it'll be a while until this one releases. So, general update. Channel will have more mid-range videos, the YouTube channel. My target is one video, either like a mid-range length video, anywhere from like 3 to 10 minute long video, or a podcast episode. One or the other will release once a month, and this is due to a number of factors. It's due to my research, all the languages I'm trying to juggle, learning the master's degree I'm now working on. And I also have some work travel opportunities. I can't really get into all of that right now, but potential to travel to some MQuad relevant places. And I'll leave it at that. But yeah, just with everything going on, it's going to be very difficult to be consistent, but I still want to be consistent. So if you're wanting a podcast or just wanting content in general and a podcast didn't drop, go check the YouTube channel. I'm going to try to have something drop at the beginning of every month. That's going to be the new schedule for probably the next couple of years at this rate. So just for your general awareness as the listener. Yeah, because I started my master's. I'm doing clinical mental health studies. And yeah, I'm almost done with my second class now, actually, counseling ethics. So
And I'm almost done with the program.
yeah, you're doing your practicum right now, about to start your internship in the next couple of weeks. And then, then you're able to for real counsel people without any supervision. So
yeah.
So busy phase of life for both of us. I'm slammed in work and renovations and all sorts of other stuff, potential travel, bouncing all around. So it's just a lot. Still interested in making content. Like, again, this kind of started out just as like, let's just speculate about stuff and everything and have some fun. And it's still about that, but I'm much more interested in putting academic rigor behind what I'm bringing to the table, especially with having butted heads with an academic that I think is very off base on the platform.
I think you can have both. Like, I think you can have fun, but you can also be rigorous with, your academic studies.
I was hoping you were going to say more. I needed a sip of water.
That's all I needed to say.
Okay. But But yeah, because like, I don't want to steer people the wrong way with our content. I want to do a good job laying out the evidence as best I understand it and building logical arguments off of that and then inferring conclusions off of that. I want to blend academic thought process and rigor and methodology with the fringe and the weird. I want to it's kind of like Avatar Last Airbender, the bridge between two worlds. It's like the spiritual and the physical.
Secret tunnel.
But yeah, so it's like I want to, because a lot of academics, because of their like career aspirations or whatever else, like kind of get scared by some of the more fringe things, and even things that aren't fringe, like Atlantis. Atlantis isn't fringe, but like scholars get scared off by the topic, like like they're allergic to the A word, and it's like. It's like we should, but I made a video about that already in the channel, and there'll be a couple more short forms. I'll explain that in a minute though. But it just with like, I don't know, we shouldn't be scared of Atlantis because there's reason to think that like could be legit. Like I see no reason to seriously question it. It's just because of all the stigma around it that academics get centered on their career instead of seeking the truth. And that again, that's like the beauty of like the whole premise I've set up with MQuad from the start, like from episode 1, is it's just about seeking what's true. I don't care if it conforms to academic consensus or not. If it's true, it's true. Academic consensus, like it can sometimes have a bearing, but that's just basically appeal to authority and appeal to popularity at the same time, blending two logical fallacies together. It can carry merit, but you can't base an argument off of, the majority of scholars agree or, blah, blah, blah. I found a fantastic article by Michael Heiser, actually, that he literally calls out critical scholarship wholesale and identifies that they use circular reasoning and how they date certain like biblical texts, like that they're trying to prove what they're trying to prove what their conclusion is with like their premise, like it's circular, and it's something that I pretty closely have identified in a different sense, and he like blatantly said it, and I'm like, this is beautiful, I love this. It's like he's like, I'm doing my own research without bias, not even being familiar with Dr. Heiser much, previously. And then reading his stuff and researching. And it's like, yeah, he's reached a lot of the same conclusions I have just from like my independent research. And then he goes beyond it. And I'm like, okay, so this is pretty cool. So, but yeah, so my goal is to take and blend the weird and like the academic rigor all into one, and to not be afraid of the unknown. I don't really care about an academic career, having tenure at a school, or anything like that. I do want to get a master's in ancient Near Eastern studies so that I can round out my training and actually have a degree to put behind a lot of the stuff that I talk about. But that's kind of more of a tool for me to kind of use in a sense, not so much for me to like be like, oh, now I care about academics and all this stuff.
It's a surprise tool that'll help you later.
Exactly. So yeah, psychology masters is going well because that's first, because money is important in this economy. Having a good job that's able to pay for all the research and all the books that I have to buy.
Yeah.
So research is not cheap, but yeah. So having a good baseline income is a good place to start. So psychology is kind of taken priority, and I have a professor that was a bit nitpicky about grading. So I was having to invest a lot more time than expected into some like recent papers and academic work as well. So that really choked me up a ton on prepping content, because I probably spent like 18 hours over like 3 days like working on a paper.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah. And it wasn't even like super long. I think it was like 10 pages or something like that. It's like, it's not a long, it should not have, but I had to like go through it with a fine tooth comb because he was like being very nitpicky.
Well, and I also read it too.
Yeah. I had you read it and like tell me if there was anything you saw that was like a glaring error that he might flag. But yeah, as we're sitting here, I was going to talk about language progress next, and I realized I had to add a language to the list. So, yeah, because we're talking about doing some travel where Spanish might be necessary, and I'm not going to name places yet because I don't want to deliver false promises. But yeah, so right now I'm currently studying 12 languages, and again, I'm not like, this isn't wholesale. Like I'm not like doing every single day for an hour each language. That's just not humanly possible on top of everything else. But I have different systems. I'll rotate different weeks for different languages. Some are kind of steady. Some is like, maybe 5 minutes a day. I'll review some stuff or something. I have like a whole weird system, and I'm able to keep some consistency with. And the trade-off with doing so many languages is that some will do really well and others will just kind of like slowly inch up. And slowly inching up, I'm thinking of Greek right now, because Greek, I've been doing it probably 5 months, 4 months, and it's snail's pace. So this it's still impressive, but it's not as impressive as like I've mastered all these languages. So don't think that's what I mean when I'm listing these off. So the languages I'm working on now, I'll set aside German because it doesn't fully count. But it is still one of the 12 that I'm working on and maintaining. Sumerian, Akkadian, Hebrew, Ugaritic, Greek, German, Middle Egyptian, Demotic, Classic Mayan, Quiche, Phoenician, and Spanish.
You sound like an absolute lunatic.
I do. I was listing this in front of like a guest that we were like talking with at one point, like a couple weeks ago. And I was literally like thinking, and I'm like, if I was in his shoes right now, I probably wouldn't believe me. And so your skepticism as a listener is 100% justified. I don't blame you for that. Because I was like thinking, it's like, I've seen people that claim stuff like this, like Billy Carson. And it's like, yeah, no, I don't think.
Full of it.
Yeah. Yeah. But like, yeah, so skepticism is justified. And that's part of the reason why I did the Sumerian practice live too, is it's kind of a way for you to see I'm not full of crap as a listener. And it's a way to make content so that I can produce some content still, even though I'm busy, because I'm already sitting down and needing to practice. And I'm already would be doing that like anyway, like sitting down and reading some Sumerian lines. So, taking that and just live streaming it works for, some quick, easy content to make for, you as listeners to know that we still exist and we're still relevant. And not many people watch it. That's fine. And I'm not perfect. You can go watch me make mistakes live. That happens a lot. But that's the phase I'm at in Sumerian. That's how I learn. And it kind of all started with Sumerian for me. It's like once I realized I could do Sumerian, I'm like, well, might as well start adding more, and just kind of slowly started snowballing. But all of this is building to something, and the direction we're going, all roads lead to Atlantis. I am a huge Atlantis fan, and I've mentioned it in passing on the podcast. Again, this is probably perfectionism coming into play a bit, but I do not want to deep dive Atlantis until I can really deep dive Atlantis.
Yeah.
Like, I really want to have a lot to bring to the table. And that is the inspiration behind 3, 4 of these languages. Greek, Middle Egyptian, Demotic, and Phoenician. That spurred all of those on. And there's other goals here as well. I want to break down like Mayan myth. Classic Mayan kind of gives me some potential tools for that, and potential tools for maybe some archaeological work in like maybe 5 years or so. Quiche is what the Popol Vuh is written in, and I'd like to be able to study that in its original language eventually, because I know I mention it a lot, but I haven't read the whole thing yet, and I want to actually be able to go and study it in its original language eventually. But yeah, so like pursuing ancient myth is definitely a big focus of everything here. And that's what inspiration for a lot of these languages is, so I can get extra insights that might be missed by like the casual myth researcher. Do you want to talk about cryptids more? That's another direction that, we'll be going in the near future.
Mothman.
But yeah. Yeah, from a grounded perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, Atlantis eventually is the goal, because it's a huge passion project of mine, and I have my own theories and everything on it, but I want to be able to lay a lot of groundwork with it, dive deep into Greek myth and Egyptian mythology before, because those are all mentioned in different nods. And during that time period, demonic probably would have been spoken, which is it's a variant evolution of Middle Egyptian, basically, is my understanding. And so that's why I'm learning demotic, is because I want to understand what nuances existed there, because we don't know if the priests speaking to Solon were speaking Greek, Middle Egyptian, or demotic. And understanding all three of those languages gives me framework to postulate about translation gaps in the Atlantis dialogues as they're handed down and they're discussed in Critias and Timaeus. Because again, we have to think about transmission chain. All of this stuff is leading, towards Atlantis and other mythologies and everything. Anything you want to add? I'll add one final thought after I give you the floor for a minute, and then we'll do closeouts.
I mean, I really don't have any other updates other than starting my practicum and internship, and I'm kind of letting you pick the channel topics. So
yeah,
there may be more psychology topics in the future. I'm just not sure yet. We haven't really discussed it. So
maybe have you do an episode on light spectrum or something like that.
Yes,
we talked about that.
The electromagnetic spectrum.
A while, not anytime soon, because I know you're really busy right now with clients. So.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so one final thought I'll interject on Atlantis here, and this is something I was like thinking about, because I recently did a Randall Carlson, Graham Hancock response video to their recent Atlantis conversation, and they had some really harsh, I think, ad hominem phrasing that they used for some of their things, acting as if things are settled on the topic when they are anything but. It's fine to have your perspectives, but I think you have to be respectful of everyone else, and intentionally or not, that's the way I read it. Because like Graham basically calls like one perspective stupid after they kind of misrepresent it, and I'm like, okay, well, I respect you for stepping outside of the standard model, but we don't really have enough evidence to claim anything for certainty about Atlantis. Like I think we could postulate it did exist, again, because I'm more of a trusting person and we can do some literary analysis, and that's a whole nother conversation. But to academically claim with certainty that it's proven, we haven't archaeologically discovered it, and now we can't do that. So like any form of dating consequentially off of that, like we also can't really do that because we haven't verified that it exists. So we don't know if, what kind of dating was used, what kind of calendar system. Anyway, all that to say, regarding Atlantis, if you believe in calamities that can destroy Atlantis, you cannot also wholesale accept traditional dating methods, because those methods of dating actually assume there are no unknown calamities that would disrupt the dating process. So that's an important thing to keep in mind if you're thinking about the Atlantis conversation. And I see it looks, I don't follow his work in depth, but it seems like Randall Carlson actually kind of falls into this pit a little bit here. From my loose read, it seems like he kind of trusts all of the dating of the Younger Dryas and all of that, and you can't necessarily trust the dating methods that get you there, because they're not factoring in like the calamity that could have destroyed Atlantis necessarily, and any other subsequent calamities, because the Egyptian priests talk about many different local floods and I think fire raining down from the sky at least at one point, if not at multiple points. And so you have to think about all of this and have a healthy amount of skepticism and think about the consequences of what like your beliefs are. It's like if you believe in mass catastrophes of the past, that kind of throws out the standard model dating framework out the window. Now, not entirely, we can still pull some pieces off of it, but we have to apply a critical thinking lens to it. And I'm not going to beat the dead horse on that. You, as the listener, if you've listened to the previous episode, you understand, the groundworks of critical thinking. And you can kind of infer some conclusions off of there. And we'll talk about this more when we actually get to Atlantis. So, all right. Buy us a cup of coffee link will be in the show notes. More like buy us a book, because research. $25 donation or more will get you mentioned as a producer for the upcoming show. There is no pressure to donate ever. I understand it's not an option for everyone. Don't expect it from the listeners. Just happy that you're tuning in and seeking the truth with us. But if you feel inclined, it's there. At the very least, though, do ask that you share the podcast with someone. If you know someone that might enjoy our content, be like, hey, check out MQuad. And they'll be like, what is MQuad? And there you go. You've helped us grow our listener base by, I don't know, I don't. Yeah.
One.
Yeah, one. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube handles are all m.quad.musings. It's been too long since I've done this, going off of memory. Website is, I think, mquadmusings.com. Maybe. I
don't even know.
I haven't looked at the mquadmusings.com. Yeah. The same handle, just no periods. Email is m.quad.musings@gmail.com. So email us with questions, confessions, concessions, contentions, whatever you like about the show, whatever you dislike about the show. I do have the email down because I use the email. Don't really look at the website a lot right now.
Email us.
Yeah, just focused on research. But yeah, Discord server link. There is a new channel where I post some updates and discoveries I make as I make them. I'll qualify with very little these days. But yeah, research is still happening. If there's more activity on the Discord server, I might chime in with some more research nuggets as I have them. But yeah. So whether you've been listening on the earth with the mortals, in the stars of heaven with Enoch and the cherubim, or
down in the depths of Sheol,
we thank you for quantumly transcending time to join us for this epic conversation. And remember, if you ever find yourself in ancient Mesopotamia in need of some fine copper as a time traveler, Ian Nasir is not your man. Ishet uznim lu tisha adi nipacher.